At the ice. Okay, welcome back. As we talk about the iceberg principle, we're going to be dealing again with the truth triangle in the end of this, and I'm going to show you why that's so important here. But we're still dealing with this iceberg principle, and as you recall, as we looked at the iceberg principle, we see that the iceberg has the top of it is the part that people see. And we started in our last lecture, we talked about the A and the P. And one of the questions that I had was really a very interesting question, and I think an important one for me to address. So I want to go back and talk about that for just a moment or two. Why I'm so insistent on the action word in the message. For instance, seek the peace of God. Secure the peace of God and be satisfied with the peace of God. 3 action words. We're looking here for verbs. And let me encourage you, you could go online, real simple, do a Google search, and you can find in a Google search some action words. Just type in action word list or action verb list, and you'll get you a number of them that you can just download off the internet. And it'll help you keep from being real stale in your message preparation and just using the same action word over and over again. So that's a problem that I sometimes have. But back to the question, why do we use the action word married to a principle? And there's a simple 2-part reason. Number one, because... And this isn't number one because it's most important necessarily, but it works, okay? People pay attention to action words. You put the action word in there and it brings your message alive. One of the big mistakes that I see so often in my own preaching is that when I try to just write out a principle, peace of God in the heart, peace of God in others' hearts, peace of God in the church's heart, I just put the principle there. What ends up happening is that the message can lose its direction. Now, let me bring you to the second reason I say this is important, because this is really what undergirds the whole thing and probably the most important, because it's biblical. Okay, you say, what do you mean, biblical? Okay, there are 2 words. Number one, we do preaching. The word preach, the New Testament word for preach that's most often used is the word caruso. And the word caruso has the idea of an announcement, a teaching, a preaching, an announcement, a direction. It's the idea of telling people what they need to do. It's not a discussion. Preaching is not a discussion. Preaching is meant to be direction. And in that direction, you're telling people what they do. The background of the very word itself in Bible days was that of a herald who would come to town in order to make the announcement for the king. And in making that announcement, he would then instruct people as to what they were to be doing. This is what the king is now declaring for our kingdom. Now, a side note here for just a moment, for those of you that are preaching. And I realize we have some teachers here among us, but let me encourage you for a moment to think through this word preach in the New Testament. In the New Testament, the word preach has been pointed out by some who believe that the word preach is never used. Did you get that? Never used, in their opinion, never used in a church setting. It is always used, in their opinion. I'm not saying I fully agree with them here. I believe that they are pretty much on the mark, though. It is never used in a church setting. It is always used in an evangelism setting where you're dealing with lost people. That direction, that announcement. The word that is used in both evangelism and also in a church setting is the word teach. The word teach, didasko, is a word which has the idea of interaction. It has the idea of instruction and of listening to the students so that you can correct them and bring them back to proper truth. The word teach often, well, in fact, every church setting that I find in the New Testament, it's the word teach. The word preach in clear passages is only used in evangelism settings. And there are a couple of passages that I'd say were left open with a little bit of question marks with the word preach. Now, at the end of preaching, what we're asking for is action. That's why we say, okay, let's have the action word in here, because it number one does give direction to the listeners, to those who hear us preach. But number two, because it helps keep the preacher on track. It's so easy as a preacher to get locked into regurgitating facts and truths that you've learned and you've studied, and you've filled yourself with so much information you just want to pour it out to the people, and that information becomes overload, and then they don't know what to do with it anyway. Preaching needs to be more action-oriented instead of so heavy-headed oriented. Teaching, on the other hand, still needs to end also in action. We're not to be hearers only of the word, we're to be doers. And the end result of all of our learning is to be taking what God has taught us in His Word and putting it into action. Therefore, I say, having an action word in your outline is one of the wisest things you can do. Now, let me say what I said in the last lecture. I'm not saying that this is the only way to structure a message. I am saying I think it is one of the strongest ways that you can do so. And so I strongly encourage it. But again, variety is necessary. I'm not saying this is the only way. I am going to say that it ought to be in your research, in your preparation time, that action word should be there at least in your notes and clear in your mind as you prepare to deliver that particular message. Now, let's go back now and talk about a second part of this as we think about the iceberg principle. The top of the iceberg is a part that people see. And so what they're going to be able to see is going to be, yes, the words that you use. Those words become pretty critical to them, and as they see those words, they draw their attention. I mentioned in the last lecture that church, I literally saw people in church after church while I was using this method for a year back in America. I literally saw people lean over in the pew asking people for note paper, or dive to the floor to ladies to get their purse. And I even saw pastors tapping their wife on the shoulder saying, "Give me some paper," so that they could write it down quickly. Yes, I saw that happen, and it was encouraging to me because it meant, whoa, they're listening. Now, I don't know if they listened to everything in between, but they wanted to get down the outline at least. And so that A plus P, A plus P, A plus P, all of that is your message. It's the points of your message. It's the seek the peace of God, secure the peace of God, satisfied with the peace of God. That's what it is. Now, the second part, not as quickly seen. Don't miss this one. The second part, not as quickly seen, but definitely is a major draw in keeping attention, is that unifying BI, the big idea. Now, this has been bantered about with different terms. Some people call it a theme. Some people will call it the purpose of the message, the sermon main idea. Other ways to look at this is the idea. For instance, if you were to look at the Mona Lisa, okay? You got the Mona Lisa. And if you had the Mona Lisa just without a frame on it, laying on on the counter in your workshop. Now, I'm not talking about a book workshop. I'm talking about your woodwork shop, your garage, all right? If you had the Mona Lisa just laying there and your kids came out and saw the Mona Lisa there, would they value it? And the answer is probably not, unless you'd taught them to value it. They'd look at it and say, wow, that looks like something to color on, or maybe they'd just throw it away. I don't know. The Mona Lisa isn't very pretty to me. But anyway, shows my taste in art, I guess. But what would end up happening is they would not value it. But put a frame around the Mona Lisa. Hang that frame in the Louvre. Make it a beautiful frame, hang it in the Louvre, and all of a sudden it's worth millions of dollars. Now, what made it of value? Well, I'll tell you part of it is the frame. You don't put a cheap plastic frame on the Mona Lisa. You're going to put a beautiful wood frame that's probably got all kinds of etchings in it and paintings, etc. itself, and it gives value, helps to give value, or at least help you assess that there is value in that painting. Now, what is the big idea? The big idea is how you frame the message. What is the purpose of your message? What is this message all about? And I'm going to talk to you real quickly about how to do that in a moment or two. But let me drive this home, if I could, for a moment. Let's suppose you're walking down the street and you decide to take a shortcut through the alley. So you're walking through the alley. And as you're walking through the alley, this fella comes dressed in rags. His clothes are tattered. And maybe he hasn't taken a bath lately. And he smells a little bit, and he comes up to you and he says, hey, wait, Bill, right there, stop. Listen, I've got to talk to you. Your reports have come back, and you've got a serious heart problem. We've got to get you in the hospital right now for an operation. What are you going to do with the guy? You're going to figure he's drunk. You're going to push him away. You're going to, whoa, this guy's nuts. You've never met him before. You're going to go on your way. Now, put it in a different frame, in a different setting. All of a sudden, you walk into the doctor's office. You've never been to this doctor's office before. Out walks a man, a distinguished-looking man. He's obviously clean, and he's wearing a white doctor's coat. He calls your name, Bill. Bill, normally I don't do this in the waiting room, but we need to get you to the hospital immediately. I just saw your results. You have heart problems. We must get you right now. I've called an ambulance for you. Do you listen? Yeah, far better you listen to the doctor, or at least the man in the doctor's coat. Maybe he isn't even a doctor. Maybe he's just the janitor who put the doctor's coat on, for all you know. But the guy in the back alley, maybe he was the real doctor. Maybe he'd had a hard night or something. I don't know. But the frame matters. How you set your message up. And number one, you need to set it up in your own mind. And that's what the big idea is all about. And second, you need to set it up in the mind of those that are listening to you. So you start out with, what is this passage all about? Well, let me tell you what this passage is here in the book of Colossians. It's all about harmony in the church. That's what Paul is addressing. He's talking about how to have harmony in the church. Now, you can spend a little bit of time talking about why sometimes there isn't harmony and why harmony is of value or whatever. Don't over-labor this, but you need to set the pace. You need to put the frame up before you hang the picture, which is your message. Now, here's where most people, if they go wrong in message preparation, this is where they go wrong. This is where I went wrong early in my ministry because nobody had ever taught me this before. I had to learn the hard way by making the mistake, hitting my head against the wall over and over again. Here's how I made the mistake. I would try to think of first a big idea. What's my big idea? What do I need to preach to these people? Then I'd ask, what are my message parts? 1, 2, 3. What are the three things I need to say in order to prove it to these people? And then I'd start looking for Bible verses, and I'd put all those verses together. Typically, I'd preach 40 to 60 Bible verses, cross-references in every message that I preached in the early years. And basically what I was doing was racking my mind and my heart and what little knowledge I had. I was rifling through books, hoping to find somebody who could give me a good key message that I'd be able to preach, the big idea, and then in turn maybe even give me some of the points that go under it, and then I could fill in the rest. And that's kind of how I went about some of my preaching in the very early years of my ministry. And then I happened upon some teaching on expository preaching and realizing the message needs to come out of the text. How do I get the big idea? Well, the big idea doesn't need to come from me. The big idea doesn't need to come out of my imagination or out of my mind. The big idea needs to come out of, I just realized that I forgot to turn on my video recorder, and you're not getting this recorded on video. I'm very sorry. I'll send you the notes with it, okay? But, all right, here we go. So what I realized was that out of the text needs to come the big idea, and then the points of the message need to come out of that text that I'm using. And this is why the big idea needs to start with, what does the Bible teach? What does it say? What is its purpose? That needs to be the part that we are now involved in. What is its purpose? Okay. Now, let me explain how to go about this. To go about this, what you're going to do is you are going to go to the text that you're studying. Put the text, go to the text. Put the text in a paragraph. Find the paragraph for that text. Then, from there, look at the verses and read the verses to summarize you want to summarize what that paragraph is all about. Now here's what I recommend. Summarize in one word what the paragraph is all about. Now this will be hard work to do. I'm not saying that the one word is what you're going to use in public, but this is how you're going to go about learning to get the big idea of the text itself. You're not interested in what to say to people right now. You're interested in what is Paul saying, what is Peter saying, what is Jesus saying, what is David saying, what is Isaiah saying in this particular paragraph. Let me summarize it first in one word. Second, I want to summarize it in one sentence then. What is it that he is saying? What is it that he is wanting to get across? What is it he's trying to talk about? And then you're going to try, ultimately, to summarize that all in one phrase. And often the phrase will become the title of your sermon. That phrase is your frame. That phrase becomes the purpose of your message, what the message is all about. It becomes the hook. Like, for instance, the term harmony in the church. Harmony in the church is what that section is all about there in Colossians chapter 3. But if you look at it carefully, the way to bring that out and really give it more punch would be three areas for bringing about harmony in the church. Okay, you're going to have 3 points in this particular message. Or how to have harmony in the church, which I like better. How is always a real simple one to fall back on. And as you do this, what you're doing is you're bringing out what is the purpose of this. Then when you go to the text itself, you're going to be able to pull the points out of the text, and it's going to become an expository message. Expository meaning out of the text, well, exegetical actually, but expository is to exposit, to speak out of the text itself. You find the text, you find what the text says, and then you say what the text says. You apply what the text says. We're going to talk about all that as we go further in. We're going to dig into the truth triangle. Now, what we're looking at is the top part of the iceberg in all of this. All we're seeing is the top part of the iceberg as we're working on the big idea. So you need the big idea in order to develop your main points. You need the main points in order to develop your big idea. All of this comes together. All of this is done by you coming back to the text, spending time in the text, looking at the paragraph, summarizing it. And I recommend this exercise over and over and over and over again. You ought to become good at summarizing things. We as preachers are good at extrapolating and making them longer and bigger. But we need to be better at one word, one sentence, and ultimately one phrase. And then from there you can develop what is the frame that this sermon is going to push to be set in. All right. Well, I hope that that's of some value. I'm very sorry I forgot to get the whiteboard recorded today. Too many buttons to push for me, evidently. But anyhow, I will send you. All right. God bless you is my prayer. I'll get back to you on the truth triangle very soon.